Hi there, DR Klein here. A number of you have reached out to me since I posted my last video asking what's going on. Where are the videos? What's going on with the airplane? And why haven't I updated the YouTube channel for almost 3 years now? I'm sitting here filming this as we're in week 8 of the coronavirus lockdown self-isolation situation on Memorial Day weekend 2020. I have not traveled since early March and haven't left the house too much since mid or late March. So it's been a while now. And in that time, while I've been busy working, as most of you are, and trying to get things done, I've also caught up on YouTube and actually saw a bunch of messages people had sent me that I didn't realize had come in, and answered them, but also realized that now I had the time and it was worth giving you all an update and maybe picking up the channel again. So, what's the deal with the YouTube channel and what I've been doing? Well, for those of you who follow know that I was posting videos about November 130 Mike Sierra, a 1979 MU2 Marquis model, which I acquired in 2013 and flew for a number of years, both for business and personal reasons, as well as charity, and doing a lot with the Veterans Airlift Command, flying wounded warriors around, as well as for Pilots and Paws, a charity that helps transport rescue dogs to their forever homes. In August of 2015, I was suddenly, along with a number of coworkers, laid off, lost my job, and there's never good timing for something like that, but in this case it was literally 2 weeks before my oldest son was starting college. And so we were faced with a lot of challenges in terms of what we were going to do, and finances obviously became really important. And one of the decisions we made that was very difficult, but it was the right decision, was what to do with the airplane. And the answer was actually quite simple. It was that you sell the airplane. An airplane is a marvelous luxury, and just like a boat or a second home, a beach house or a lake house or whatever, it's something you enjoy, and you're very grateful to have it, but it certainly isn't necessary to live. And so we put the plane on the market, and after a couple of months it did sell, and pretty close to the asking price, and I'll probably do a video on that and what happened, but we sold the airplane. And the flying I was doing was with airplanes that friends owned. I had some very close friends in the MU2 community who were kind enough to share their airplanes with me, loan them with me, so that I could stay current in the MU2, so that I could keep on flying. And I was flying a right seat for some people who needed somebody to fly with them, and just had a little bit more experience or a little bit of a different background in flying. I ultimately joined a consulting firm where most of my work is internationally, and so for the last 3 years I've actually been traveling extensively, 2 to 3 weeks a month, but almost always overseas. And anybody who has owned an airplane knows that the very worst thing you can do for an airplane is to leave it sitting and not use it. Machinery doesn't like to sit unused. It's not good for it. And if you don't use it for a long enough time, it can actually be damaging to the aircraft or to the engines, unless you take procedures to preserve it and basically put it in a shutdown status. So given the fact that I didn't have the time to use an airplane regularly, I made the decision not to buy another one when my financial circumstances changed, and instead have been flying with good friends who have airplanes and doing some really interesting trips in some really interesting airplanes. I've taken videos of a number of those, and in the coming weeks I'm going to actually break out those videos and post some more things to YouTube, so that you can kind of see a little bit of a different kind of flying and see what other things are out there besides the MU2. I also think I'm probably going to put a couple of videos together about the airplane ownership experience. 30 Mike Sierra was the second airplane I've owned. The first one was an M20K, a Mooney 231, turbocharged piston single, and the MU2 was my second airplane. Clearly a big step up, a much larger airplane, a turboprop, and flying in the flight levels is very different than when you're flying in a piston airplane, even if it's a turbocharged airplane. So I've kind of had the I'd call the mid-level GA experience with the Mooney, which I owned for a number of years and flew all over the country, but especially in the Midwest for business, and the MU2 now. And so I think I'll put together some videos that share what the experience was like buying an airplane. What are some things that you can look for? What are some lessons learned? Things to watch out for? Maybe another one on what the ownership experience like, and answer some really hard questions, especially the one that everybody never wants to talk about, but it's the driving factor, which is what does it cost, and what are those costs based on? Because I was flying for business with both airplanes, for tax purposes, I had to keep very detailed financial records. So the good news is I have those records, and we'll break them down and share them with you in some coming videos. And then we'll talk about the selling experience. I'd really appreciate your feedback. If you've got ideas for other stories, I'm not sure how we're going to take this channel going forward. I've thought about turning it more into some of those travelogue type things, because I travel so often internationally, and I go to some very interesting places, but also some pretty off the beaten path places that might be interesting to you. On the other hand, I'm still doing flying, as I said, with friends, and maybe we'll keep it an aviation themed channel, or we might take it in a totally different direction. As my children are always want to remind me, I am far from a social media expert. I'm just discovering this Instagram thing. I've been active on Twitter for a little while, but Instagram is brand new to me. And YouTube I've been doing for a while, but I really never did it from a social media perspective. I got into YouTube originally as a way to share some videos we had taken of our children when they were babies and sharing them with the grandparents. I originally got into YouTube as a way of sharing videos with the grandparents. I was in the Navy at the time, and they were far away, and it was a way to let them see what their young grandchildren, the babies, were actually doing. Those babies are now 23 and 17, so clearly a number of years have passed. But when the 17-year-old was a new baby, we bought our first ever digital camcorder. And we could take videos and we could upload them to this thing called YouTube, make them private videos and share them with the grandparents, and they could see what their grandchild was doing from across the world. When I got the airplane, I started taking videos, and I used that digital camcorder, and it was horrible by YouTube standards, even for back then, let alone now with the really good production values that so many videos you see out there are made to. And my hat goes off to those people who do it really on a very professional level. This was with at that point, probably 10-year-old digital camcorder. I think it was only about a 680 DPI resolution, so it was not very good, but it's what I had, or 680 pixels. But people seem to enjoy them. And I did a trip where I picked up some family friends and the family in Tampa, and we flew down. They wanted to go for a ride in the airplane, and I said, well, why don't we fly somewhere for dinner? And they said, oh, that would be great. We'd really be excited. And so, surprised them, we flew all the way to Key West from Tampa, got there, had a great dinner, and then flew home that night. And they could not believe that they went from Tampa to Key West for dinner and back in the same night. And they were just thrilled. And I filmed that trip with that crappy little digital camcorder. So as a thank you gift, my friend actually gave me my first ever GoPro. Here it is right here, a GoPro Hero 3 Plus. So for then it was, I don't think it was the top of the line one, but it was one step down from top of the line. But I'd never seen a GoPro before. I'd never heard of them. I mean, I think I'd heard of them in passing or on YouTube, but certainly had never looked at one seriously, because I wasn't into the kind of things that it seemed the GoPros were really aimed at. Surfers and skaters and BMX bikers and that kind of stuff. But he got it for me, and by gosh, it really changed how I made videos in the airplane and how I did things. So I started out with that one camera, and then bought a second camera and started playing with somewhat better production values, where I could show two views. You'd have one out the window and one in the cockpit or something like that. And as I continued on, I realized that the one thing I thought my videos were missing, that some people had and some didn't, was cockpit audio, where you could actually hear the intercom and the radio communications. And all you really heard was engine noise. So I tried to figure out, how am I going to record and capture that stuff? The good news is the airplane had plenty of audio jacks for headphones where you could plug in and you could hear the audio, but how would I get that into the GoPro to record it? And I knew that there were attachments to feed a microphone feed into a GoPro, but because the airplane audio system had an electrical signal that was driven to drive noise-canceling headphones, I could never get it to work right. So what I ended up discovering was a really interesting device. For those of you who haven't flown in airplanes, most audio jacks, headphone jacks, there's two plugs. One of them is the microphone in, and the other one is the headphone jack out. And it is a big 1/4-inch plug. It's the same thing that you used on old style headphones that you would plug into your stereo if you're old enough, back before we went to these little millimeter sized plugs or Bluetooth. So getting those kind of cables was easy, because those are the exact same cables that are used in the theater business and in the music business when you're connecting different microphones to each other, or instruments, and feeding things into a soundboard. So I was able to get a short cable, a 3-foot cable with those male plugs on each end, no problem, from a guitar store, an electric guitar store of all places. But the real trick was, how was I going to record it? Was I discovered at that same guitar store that they had a device that took that 1/4-inch plug. It had a female receptacle. It took the 1/4-inch male into it, and on the other side it had an iPhone headphone jack to plug into an iPhone. And it was the exact same jack that you had on your AirPods, which meant it was a 3 connector plug, not a 2 connector plug. So not only did you have a stereo signal left, right, but you also had a mic line coming in, just like your earbuds do for the ones that were wired and would plug into the older iPhones. So now what I could do, it was actually designed and sold. It's a product called iGuitar, and what I understand it's used for, I'm not a guitar player, is you plug it into your electric guitar, and then you can actually record, and your electric guitar signal you can record onto your phone to record your music. Well, in this case, what I could do was feed it in, and then I just got a recording app called Voice Record, which is available free in the App Store, and I could actually record the audio of everything that was coming in from the airplane audio system. So the only trick then was synchronizing things up. And I went through a lot of different techniques, but I'd already played with it a bit because I was trying to get the 2 camera signals synced up so that I could jump between them as I was editing the videos. And I would just lay the audio track so that I basically had 3 tracks in the audio, or in the video editing program. I had camera 1, camera 2, which had video and audio feeds, even though the audio feeds were very bad because it was the ambient noise in the airplane. And the 3rd track was just the audio coming off of the iPhone file. And what I got to doing, it sounds really simple, but I would literally put my hand in view of both cameras, and I would say 1, 2, 3, clap. And then what I could do is, on the video feeds from the 2 cameras, I could line up exactly where my hands came together. And in the audio feed, I could get to exactly where I said the word clap, and I could see it on the little audio signal there, and I would line them up, and then everything would be synchronized. And then after that, it was very easy to cut and edit and build the videos. So that's how I made my videos. I'm sure that there are much better ways to do them and to synchronize them, that those of you who are experts in this kind of stuff just laugh at how I did it. But it was pretty basic, and it worked for me. So that's how the videos came about. That's what I was doing. And in terms of where's 130 Mike Sierra now, well, on December 31st, 2015, I sold that plane to a very nice gentleman, and he has been using it ever since for, I believe, mainly business travel, flying down in the Alabama area. Occasionally, you can see it on FlightAware, and it'll make a flight down to Florida or over to Georgia or something like that. But I think it was mainly between several locations he had in his business. So 130 Mike Sierra is out of my life. The plane I've been flying most often now, as I mentioned, I think is a Cessna 441 Conquest 2. Great airplane. Prior to getting in that airplane, I swore that if I ever bought another turboprop, the only thing I would buy was an MU2, because I really thought it was the ideal airplane. The operating costs were lower. The fuel burn was lower, you got more speed out of it, the engines were more responsive, and the planes were just built like tanks. And the other big selling factor is Mitsubishi's continuing commitment to supporting airplanes that haven't been produced now in almost 40 years. But the 441 was an interesting airplane. It is an interesting airplane, and we'll talk about that in some future videos because I've got some great videos of trips we've done in that. As I mentioned, it's got the same engine as the MU2 Marquis, the Garrett TPE 331-10. Just a superb turboprop engine. But in some ways it's different, in some ways it's similar. We'll talk about that in another video, but that's what I've been flying lately and most often. Great airplane, enjoy flying it. And the only thing I think flying out there today that compares to an MU2 Marquis in terms of size, performance, capability. So we'll explore that one in videos coming up. In closing this video, I appreciate all the feedback. I appreciate the expressions of concern. No, the plane is fine. No, I am flying. I continue to fly. Unfortunately, these days, most of my flying is in the back as a passenger on international flights where it just doesn't make sense. There's no way you could do it in your own airplane as much as I'm traveling and where I'm going. But I am still doing some flying, and we're going to start these videos up. Please comment. If you've got any suggestions, you can reach out to me or post a comment on this video. I promise I will answer you, and I'd really appreciate your feedback. What are things you're interested in? Should we keep this about aviation? Should we talk about aircraft ownership and flying and those kind of things? Should we turn it in some other direction? I'd really appreciate your feedback, and I look forward to engaging with you now that I'm back on YouTube. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the well wishes.